You go to that plunge place. There are a lot of people.
There's never too many. Like, there's two parts. So there's a part that's traditional lap and unlapped. And once in a while, you have to wait. There'd be two people in that. Try to go three if you But I go in the back, and that one goes this way. And the laps are shorter, but that's where all the old people go. Walking, but and you can always find spot sometimes. Just good, but
Welcome, everybody.
Paul Hawkins?
So spirituality is extremely simple. In its entirety, it consists of the practical fact that what this is not what you think it is. What you are is not what you think you are. So it's simply a matter of discovering what this actually is and letting go of orienting to your mistaken notions of what you're used to thinking it is. That constitutes success in spirituality, constitutes realization, which is a very simple thing. What makes it not so simple is habit and the perversity of the mind and the energy system that fixates on and holds on to the ways it's been doing things. It's very conservative. It's very habit oriented. So it's actually very easy to see actuality the way it is. What's hard is not to see reality. What's hard is to let go of unreality. Because typically we have a lifelong, at least lifelong, habit of orienting to our mistaken notion of what this is. The good news is that actuality is not in any way hidden or concealed. It's completely nakedly displayed. And it's completely obvious the ways that it deviates from what people typically mistake it to be. So that's an overview of the whole thing. The process is one of orienting to the actuality of experience, rather than interpretations or concepts and imaginations, fantasies of experience. This can be a little tricky because we're used to orienting to fantasies, to imaginings, and thinking that they are actual. So learning to discriminate between what's imaginary and what's fantasy and what is actual can be an aspect of this too. But rather than deconstructing imagination, the simplest approach is simply attend to actuality, attend to the way it is, and the very way that it is, the very evidence that it will continually present of its nature will inherently undermine and contradict the fantasies and imaginings that we're used to having about what it is and what we are. Some very gross generalized examples of this contrast is, for example, we might typically imagine we live in a stream of history with the past and the present and the future, whereas the actual fact, the actual evidence of experience is simply the fact of the present moment. It's the only thing that actually exists. Likewise, we may imagine we live in a vast space. You know, the whole material universe is outside ourselves, but it's impossible to find anything like that. All one can find is patterns appearing within one's own experience, and other than the space of one's experience can be found. So on and so forth. Anyway, all of this, you know, the details of this are for one to play with, and of course we can talk about that next. But it's rather a personal matter. The important thing is one has to find this for oneself. One has to look at the actuality, the immediacy of one's own being, and relax and recognize what it is. And notice the ways that it is not, that it deviates from what we used to imagine it is. So that's it's a rough sketch. Anyone would like to discuss any specifics of this? I'd be happy to do so.
Just said something about it being personal. I heard you correctly. Anyway, I just
It is.
elaborate a little bit more on that. I mean, I think maybe what I heard is each path is like so personal.
Well, there's only one path, and that's yours. You're the sole thing that exists that you can find. You can't find anyone else. Everyone else is just an apparition in your experience, as far as you can tell. So you're the sole thing that exists. So you're the sole path.
Seems very self-centered.
It is what it is. It's not self-centered because the entirety of the universe also appears within what is present within the experiential field. I mean, it is self-centered, but this is not self-centered as a human personality or human body. It's self-centered as the self being what actually is, which is actuality itself.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, actuality is centered in itself.
I was thinking of stuff more like the ego kind of stuff. You're talking about
That's just a fantasy. Ego is an imagine, it's a fantasy, it's an interpretation. There's all sorts of apparent patterns appearing within the experiential field. Right? Sensory patterns, emotion patterns, thought patterns. We classify these things very elaborately. But all these classifications are made up. And in fact, in the naked experience, nothing can be said about what they are, or how they work, or what their relationship to each other, if any, is. So personality, emotion, thought, sensory experience, it's all just experiential patterns. It's all the same thing. So where's ego? Where's non-ego? Where's self? Where's not self? It's just presence. It's just whatever it is, actuality. So it's very simple. And of course, we've always known this. When we were newborns, we knew this. When you're a newborn, what is there? Just wow, this. Bang. Is there a you? Is there a self? Is there other? Is there, it's just wham, this. And it never changed. All that changed was a development of elaborate, sophisticated skills of fantasizing and imagining and pretending to qualify this, which is intrinsically unqualifiable. Because you can't pin down exactly what anything is. Because one of the primary aspects of actuality is unresolvable. If you look at any pattern, you cannot precisely resolve exactly what it is, or exactly how it is. Everything is fuzzy with itself. So the pretense of knowing what anything is a denial of the unresolvability, of the actual unresolvability of the fact that you cannot possibly tell what it is definitively.
But isn't it all okay? Because that's kind of what we're supposed to do as humans. Is
Okayness is not an issue.
mesmerized and contract or whatever you call it in with movie kind of thing.
Well, okayness is not an issue. What does okayness mean? That's another fantasy.
I guess for me, because I grew up Catholic, it's really about it not being such a less of a urgency to change and make, get awakened and make everything okay or figure it out. As if it was about thing to be.
There's, value judgments is just more fantasy. It's just imaginations, imaginings. This is bad, this is good.
It's what?
This is bad, this is good. It's made up. It's a game that people play. This is bad, this is good. And you have someone else, that's bad and that's good.
Okay.
Nothing is intrinsically bad or good. It's all just a bunch of weird shit.
I think it's bad or good that humans are the other guys. What's the judgment call it?
If it is, so what?
Yeah.
It's bad that the sun is the way it is. Yeah, so it's good that the sun is the way it is. Yeah, doesn't matter that the sun is the way it is. It's like the sun doesn't give a shit what you're assessing it, and those assessments are just absurd. They're hot air. There's nothing. It is what it. Yeah, it is what it is. Isness, actuality, is, and it is precisely what it is, and it is precisely the way it is, and there's nothing else, and that's what all of this is. And there's nothing else present. So it's very simple. So all of these elaborations that we're used to playing games with as humans, self and other, and our personality and okayness and struggling with this and trying to achieve that, it's just games we're playing within actuality, which doesn't care whether we're playing these games or not. Because actuality cannot become more actual, it can't become less actual. So whether you think you're winning or losing the particular game you're pretending you're playing, so what? On your deathbed, does it matter if you were a success or a failure?
I keep telling myself that.
Well, you can see though, it's not a matter of telling yourself, because that's just more fantasy. That's more asserting. You
And you
can,
get more attention if you're successful. You feel like you're. I'm just being honest. I get the. My head gets the futility of it, but I find myself. This is after escaping for 4 years, and coming back home. There's a lot of honest. Want to be successful because of others.
sure, but that's a game. But that's a game. That's just a game you play, and you're free to play it.
I don't want to play it.
Well, you're free to not play it.
Are we? I mean, are we?
You are if you are.
I don't think I can change my personality. But try.
Well, maybe you don't need to change your personality. Maybe your personality is not a coherent, consistent thing. It's not actually one way. Maybe it's a fragmented gobbledygook of all sorts of contradictory impulses and urges that are continually changing and evolving. In which case, you can find something in you that is a certain way, and you can find something else in you that is the opposite way. So you don't need to change. You already are different. It's just a matter of what you emphasize or what you focus on. But that's just more gamesmanship.
It seems even trying to get out of the gamesmanship is just another game that another.
Yeah, you don't need to get. The point isn't to get out of the game. The point is to see it. See it as a game. It doesn't matter if you're in it or not. The natural human inclination is to play these games, and it's no harm, no foul. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it or not. When you see that it's just a game, then who cares? It's like Monopoly. We're playing Monopoly here. It's just a game. So what? Play, don't play. I shouldn't be playing Monopoly. I want to get out of Monopoly. So get up, stop watching the play. But I really want to play. Okay, sit down and play. Roll the dice. Read the shit. Because that's not what matters. The games you're playing or not playing is just more games you're playing with yourself. I'm playing this game. I shouldn't be playing the game. I shouldn't be playing the game. It's just another game, and that's okay. Because there's no I shouldn't be playing the game, or maybe there is, but that's just another game, and that's cool too because your games can be infinitely convoluted, but they don't mean anything because they're all fantasy. There's no actuality there. I mean, fantasy is actual, but it's actual fantasy. The content of fantasy is not actual. If you imagine something, the presence of imagining is actual, but what you think you're imagining is not. And again, the point isn't to do anything or not do anything, or to be in anything or to get free of anything. Just see what it is. And when you see what it is, you're free of it, not because you become free of it, because you see that you intrinsically are free of it, because you're not in it. It's just another energy pattern that's appearing spontaneously, dancing around.
I do see it sometimes, and then it disappears. You know, it's like I said, real life experience takes it into another realm of anxiety and
Sure, but
involvement in the.
sure, but this is real life experience too, and it doesn't matter. The point is to see that it is that way, not to claim to seeing it that way, and then to see it all the time. When you know that it's fantasy, then it is that, whether you're attending to the fact that you don't need to walk around saying this fantasy, this fantasy, this fantasy, this fantasy, this fantasy, this fantasy. It's like, oh, this shit is all just, it's all bullshit. It's all pretense that's happening in my imagination. And then you get lost in it. It's like going lucid in a dream. You don't need to be lucid in a dream all the time, every second. But when you go lucid in a dream once or twice, you go, oh, wow, this is amazing. This isn't actually happening. I'm not actually in this. It doesn't matter what happens. And then you know that, even if you get lost in the dream again, in the background, you know that. And that's what realization is. It's not being free of anything. It's just knowing that you don't need to be free because you never were not free. I mean, even that's absurd. The whole notion of freedom is another fantasy. There's only isness. And isness is the way it is. But it happens that the way it is entirely transcendental because of its nature. And again, you can discover that just by looking at it. Because it's obvious that it's that way.
Do you still seemingly have a character and have like a life? You wouldn't. I don't know, I could say the same thing. It's just, I just find it, everything you were saying, I was like, how do you know if you realized? I really do get what you're saying in my head. There's times driving the car, I said, I get this. But there's things that I'm not, I'm still caught up in.
But the presence of angst is one thing. Being the angst is me is another thing.
That's what I'm looking at right now. I'm talking. I can see.
Maybe. I mean, the personality may be present when it's present, what we call the personality, those energy patterns, and they'll be reactive and behave the way that they do, and there may be emotionality and there may whatever, all the seeming complexities, but all of that is just patterns appearing and disappearing, and they're only there when they're there, and when they disappear, they're gone. You go to sleep and it all disappears. Where's your personality when you go to sleep? You're in deep sleep, it's just poof. All these patterns just come and go. And then you're dreaming, and then maybe you're a different personality. Or maybe not, whatever. But the point is that it's just these various patterns just sort of appearing and disappearing spontaneously, meaning nothing and with no repercussions.
Is there anything that you suggest doing in terms of meditation or self-inquiry, any of those practices?
Practices, by and large, are pretense, because you're pretending you're doing it. Now I'm going to meditate. Now I'm going to do self-inquiry. So you're defining it into existence. Actuality doesn't need to be defined into existence. So here, this, here, bang, this is it. And so just check it out, attend to it, be intelligent. It's all about intelligence. It's about being with it and noticing how weird experience is. And all of our interpretations and assumptions about it are vast oversimplifications. We create caricatures The personality is a caricature. The self is a caricature. The role in life is a caricature. It's like just like a cartoon strip. And if you look at what's actually here, what the caricatures are of, the actual patterns that are appearing, they're much weirder than that. They're much more non-linear. They're much less integrated. There's just things appear, emotion appear, and then they're gone, and another emotion, and then something else appears, and something else appears. You know, personality, everything's disjointed. Nothing. Everything kind of fits together in a synchronistic way, but nothing fits together like to form a whole or to form a neatness or to form a unified package that's all working together. It's all a mess, you could say, in one sense. Just a bunch of weird shit appearing instantaneously, and then it's gone, it's an emotion to something else, and then it's gone, and some other stuff's appearing, and there's just all this appearing. And we're in the habit, you know, we're all very familiar with this. We have this lifelong habit of identifying with, oh, this sort of loose group of patterns is my personality, and this sort of loose group of patterns is my body, and this loose group of patterns is my social position. But if you look at these loose groups, they aren't actually groups. They're random things that come up, and once they come up, that exact pattern will never come up again. The exchange or relationship you seem to have with someone else will only happen in that instant, and you'll never have that exact same exchange with them again. History does not repeat itself. Every instance, every pattern that appears is absolutely unique. And this is plain to see. So again, you just notice this intelligently. You notice the uniqueness of these patterns. And then, you know, my life as some kind of a coherent whole, it's absurd. It's laughable. It's just these little snippets and snapshots that come once only, and then they're gone forever. You know, and there's no continuity. There's no entity there. There's no thing. The claiming it's a thing is just there's just that. It's a claim. It's a fantasy. It's a projection. It's like reading a caricature of it. But if you look at what's actually there, it doesn't stand up to that way of seeing it. I mean, that you can see clearly that way of seeing it is contrived. It has to be shoehorned into it. It's not actually like that.
Yeah, so we start running no more things.
Hmm?
Because all the shoehorn starts coming in when the baby
Oh yeah,
starts growing.
you know, we're experts at this. We spent our whole lives training and doing this. And our parents trained us, and our schools trained us, and society trained us. You know, monkey see, monkey do. We're experts at creating these fantasies. But don't believe your own PR if you want to see what it really is. And the cool thing about that is what it really is much, 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 much cooler and more interesting than the dumbed down caricature cartoon human version of it. What's going on here is absolutely astounding. It's absolutely cool. And you know, this is the meeting on a Tuesday night, you know, and there's not many people showing up, and I don't know what's he talking about. You know, maybe something's on TV. You know, that's like so missing the point. You know, it's like a supernova going off of absolute uniqueness. No single apparition in your experience has ever happened before, that's appearing right now, has ever happened before and will ever happen again. It's wonderful, it's magical, it's completely unpredictable. And it's obvious, it's for real. That's not a sales pitch. It actually is that. The other is a sales pitch. The dumbing down is all brainwashing. And you can do it if you want, you know, most people do, and that's cool. But some of us, you know, say, wait a minute, I'm really, if it's possible to check out what's really going on, I'm really curious. I want to check it out. So that's all. It's just a matter. It's not like something you have to do, but it's an option. It's available to do if you find the motivation appearing.
If you don't do it.
Whatever.
the hard thing with the art is that background idea that somebody's keeping score.
Yeah. But you don't really get over it. Just see that there's more going on than that, most of which is not that at all. And then you see that that is just itself a small event, most of which is a projection that's occurring in a vast context, most of which is not that. It's not a matter of actively deconstructing everything. You don't need to, because most of it is pre-deconstructed. Most of it's intrinsically and inherently deconstructed, because
There's so much other.
yeah, there's just
Spent that much time.
yeah. I mean, you know, your field of experience is so full of just so much weird shit. And the fact that there's a few coherencies sitting around, seeming coherencies floating around, you know, they're floating around in the sea of absolute weirdness.
You said coherency, you mean things like a scrapbook or a story or something that kind of touching everything and putting your story together?
Anything that seems to be something is a coherency. This is not a cup. Okay, if you think it's a cup, you're generating a coherency, and you're pulling this incoherent, unrelated, infinite sea of flashes of experiential energy. You're drawing it together and you're drawing an imaginary circle around it, saying everything inside this circle is a cup. You create the cup, you define it into existence, and the raw material that you define it out of is this, which is not verbal. It doesn't have a label. It doesn't have parts. It doesn't have pieces. It's not compartmentalized. You know, how many things are in your field of vision? One. Field of vision. The mind is let's pretend that this is separate and that's separate and this is separate and that's separate and this.
All these objects.
There's no objects.
Yeah.
Into existence by imagining that they exist autonomously separate. You can't. If this was a separate thing from everything else in my field of vision, I could somehow lift it out of my field of vision and it would be sitting over here and all this stuff was here. I can't. It comes with the field of vision. I close my eyes, all of it disappears at once. I open my eyes, all of it appears at once. You know, this is what I mean by being intelligent. If you're intelligently look at your experience, you can see, you know, that all this subdividing occurs. It's like here you have a pie. You've just baked the pie and it's sitting on the table and you're thinking to yourself, how many pieces can I slice this into? Well, as many as you want. You can slice it in half, you can slice it in, but the pie hasn't been sliced. It's just sitting there. But you're imagining how many pieces you can slice it into. And that's how objects are created. Experience is a whole. Experience is a field. It's an inclusive field. It has no parts. It has no pieces. And that's, you know, it's very easy to notice that. You've always known it. When you were a little baby, you knew it. Huh? There's only one experience.
For me, mine.
Sure. The idea that anyone else has experience is just an idea that may or may not occur within your experience. But you can't find any such thing. So it's not actual. You alone exist.
Because very far.
It's true. It's not scary or not scary. What's really scary is denying it and substituting fantasy for it, because then you're getting lost you're getting ungrounded from what's actual and going off into, you're becoming a crazy person. On the other hand, most people seem to be crazy people. So you might seem to have a lot of company if you do that.
It's pretty normal to be dreaming.
No, it's completely normal. I mean, realization seems to be extremely rare, which is peculiar because it's so obvious. But, that's a testament to the power of attachment to mental investment, investing in holding things to be a certain way.
Okay, what you're saying is just see things intelligently.
Yeah, so it's really just a reality check.
Put that in.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. It's just a reality check. It's like, okay, so I walk in this room and what do I think's going on? Well, I'm in a room and there's all sorts of pictures and a lot of weird art around and stuff, and it's all very spiritual, I suppose. And there's chairs and there's kind of some grubby carpets on the floor, and there's, a few mismatched people sitting around and a lot of empty chairs and blah, blah. All of that's what might pop in your head at first thought if you're walking into this room. But then, what are you referring to when you say all that, or when you think all that? Well, I'm referring to the present field of my experience. Okay, so reality check. Is the present field of your experience undeniably that way, or is that just an overlay of a series of hypotheses of what it might be? It might be, I'm in this room and all these people and the empty chairs and the dirty carpet and blah, blah, blah. But then I realize, oh, but I'm dreaming. So that's just not here. It's just a dream. Oh, but I'm not dreaming. Oh, it's really here. But both of those, dreaming and not dreaming, is just another overlay. So you don't know if you're dreaming or not. So what do you know? What do you really know? Just to be ultimately skeptical, what can you be absolutely certain of? The presence of experience.
Yeah.
The presence of the concrete presence of the soul's experiential field exactly the way it happens to be now. And you can't find anything else. And just look at how true that is, and you can feel how true that is. I mean, it's not even subtle. It's really pretty obvious. It doesn't even take a lot of thought to figure that out. And then you can look at how rapidly and how easily the mind does these overlays, and that's interesting too. That's fascinating. But then you can see those overlays happening in the context that is not necessarily like that. And so it's almost like living in two worlds. There's sort of the world of actuality, and then there's the implicit world implied by the content of all these imaginary interpretive overlays. But the one doesn't actually affect the other. It's like when you're looking at that unsliced pie, imagining how many slices you could slice it into, it doesn't affect the pie. I could slice it into 16 pieces. No, I think I'll do 4. No, I think I'll do 37 3/4. The pie doesn't give a shit, it's just sitting there. All of this imaginary slicing and dicing is just that, it's imaginary. And likewise, the interpretations of objects and events is equally imaginary, slicing and dicing, of something that is just a whole present, an actuality. It's not a concept that it's actual, it's not a concept that it's present, and it's not a concept that it's whole, or at least that it includes itself. You can look and see that it really is that. That's what's undeniable, the presence of this apparent experiential field. Of course, you can't say what any of that means, because that's just going into more interpretation. So it's kind of just a reality check.
It's easier to see it when you're pointing it out and one is paying attention in the forest or having some. It really is hard to see it in the creative way.
Yeah, because we're in the habit of not, that's all. It's not actually hard to see. We're just in the habit of not. And again, habit is a very powerful force. So if someone is motivated and actually coming to see this, then the way to do that is to play with looking at it from time to time. And again, it doesn't have to be all the time or anything. It's not like you have to see it all the time, but every time you see it, it will subtly shift your sort of center of gravity of your orientation to your sense of yourself. Even if you're predominantly used to, orienting in your normal psychological self and your life and your social circumstances and whatever, even if you're used to hanging out there, you'll have more and more of a sort of a bedrock sense that, well, that's there, but that's in a context that is actually beyond it and very different than that. I mean, that's really the cool thing about this yoga, is that it's cumulative. Every time you do it, it adds to, it builds on the previous times you do. Every time you see this, it stays. Just in your whatever, it just stays. And then the next time you see it, it builds on that incrementally. So just seeing it every once in a while, whatever, every week, or every month, or every year, it doesn't matter. But every time, it's like putting a penny in the piggy bank. After a while, you're going to have a lot of money, so to speak.
Would you say that this has to be pursuing like a natural curiosity, just a real genuine passion to see it, rather than this is my practice, I'm going to force myself to do this no matter what?
Well, ultimately, it's
there, and then I get to there, and it doesn't.
Well, it doesn't. It's likely to have to be that way, because otherwise you're going into fantasy. It's a fantasy about seeing reality.
Wanting to remember, wanting to.
Yeah, whatever, and that's more pretense.
Right, it's more effort, more away.
Well, it's constructed mainly. As soon as it's constructed, it automatically deviates.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually deviate, but it deviates by implication. So as soon as you construct, as soon as you fabricate an interpretation, the implication is that is that, and the thatness that you fabricated that is implicit there will be different than the actual thisness that is here. Because this that is here cannot be finitized, cannot be grasped as being a particular way. And all of these interpretations always create a caricature. They always hold it as being a certain way. In other words, I mean, this is a little challenging to put into words. What is here is undefinable. I can't say what this actually is. It cannot be said. No one can say what this is. It's impossible to say what this is, because what it is not amenable to being captured completely in concepts. So as soon as I put together some concepts and, oh, it's a napkin, it's a pretty cheap napkin at that, and it's a little dirty. So right away, as soon as I put that into concepts, I've created a caricature that is small and little and is limited, which deviates from this, which is not a caricature. It's not small, it's not little, and it's not limited. It's not that it's not a napkin. It's just that that's not what it is. It's presence. It's the presence of experience. And what is that? I mean, try and put that in a nice little spiritual sentence. Presence of experience is completely mysterious. There's no way to wrap your head around that, let alone put it into words. And there's nothing else. So as soon as you pretend to be able to refer to something verbally, you're actually referring to a caricature of it, a very limited caricature of it.
Yeah, I heard that once you label it, you never see it again. Once you label it, see it, trees, and that way
It's not, well, it's not that you never see it again, it's just that you're creating something that's not it. It's still here. It hasn't gone away. All of a sudden, you're creating a character and you're looking over here into it.
Gotta figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. You think you know what it is. And what you think you know is inaccurate. Simply by, if nothing else, it's just limited.
Given our brains have been set up that way for many decades, at least mine. When you think of taking things like ayahuasca or some kind of plant medicine or something to shake it up and jar like
That's fine, but still, but again, it all gets down to intelligence. Because what is to be seen can be seen in any context. In other words, you know, say you take ayahuasca or LSD or something that just, you know, by brute force strips away all interpretation from you just because you're too blasted to be able to hold it together.
you forgot what a tree was.
Yeah, it's literally.
Yeah.
You forget what a tree is, but here's this,
You're right.
wow, you know, and but the wah is there even when you're straight and you're looking at it and thinking it's a tree. It still is that wah. This is still the wah right here. This really is.
Yeah, but if you can't get to it, it's even more frustrating.
But you don't. But there's nothing to get to. It is that. You're already there. It's just a matter of noticing it. So it's a little. It's not some great thing you have to do. It's just a little noticing it. Oh. Yeah. Reality is always present, even when we're churning out a layer of unreality as interpretation and pretending to overlay it on that. But reality doesn't go away when we're doing that.
I like that you said it was a little thing.
It is. It's little.
Usually it's such a gigantic
No.
thing you're looking for. That
No, it's little. It's little. But and it's even obvious because you already know it. The implications are huge, but it itself is little. You know, it's just simply, I have no idea what this is. It's made of paper. What is paper? It's white. What is white? What is color? You know? You know, it moves. What is motion? It appears in space. What is space? You know? I can't say. I don't know. It's a mystery. And it's not, it's an obvious mystery. I know that I don't know what any of those things are. But the descriptions that I regurgitate is just sort of boilerplate that I've been trained of. This is made of paper, and paper is made out of wood that's been, you know, broken down into its fibers and reconstituted in a liquid situation, and they're precipitated out into a layer of press and bullshit. But every single step of that description, I don't really know what any of those things are.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's really pretty obvious. It's not even subtle. It's just really getting honest of admitting one's cluelessness. You know, I have a fancy repertoire of being able to talk about things very sophisticatedly, but that doesn't touch what they actually are. It's all bullshit. It's like Trump talking about what a brilliant leader he is. You know, so it doesn't tie into the actuality. And basically everything that is possible, I mean, just a simple rule of thumb, anything that is possible to put into words is a fantasy. It's a fantasy about, supposedly, or based on, actuality, but the fantasy doesn't capture the actuality. So I say, this is a napkin. The napkin is a fantasy. The actuality hasn't gone away, and the napkin has nothing to do with this. Because this is infinitely more than a napkin.
Does the truth does exist in your experience?
Yes, fantasy is actual. But fantasy is actual fantasy. Fantasy pretends to be actual. So, in other words, the idea that this is a napkin, it takes a further leap, and I believe is a napkin. So the idea, the interpretation of napkin, all of a sudden becomes this object. So it becomes objectified, and that's the lie. Conceiving that, referring to this as a napkin and coming up with provisional definitions of it and descriptions of it is all fine. But when you forget that this is not that, that's when you're a crazy person, which of course is a normal human condition. And it's really a little thing to notice that every now and then.
When you look around, do you not see things broken up into, I don't know, that's the question, but lots of napkins, whatever.
Well, sure. I mean, that can happen. I can do that, but there's things happening on, there's experience. Let's say there's the presence of what I might call a visual field, and then there's a presence of imaginative interpretation of subdividing them into objects and then naming them and coming up with conceptual elaborations that are descriptions of what they are or descriptions of about them or something. But those things occur in two areas and don't impact each other. The visual field, when I start thinking about things, the presence of the light doesn't change. The thought doesn't change the shape of the light that's appearing. It happens in its own realm. The visual experience is the same. So they don't touch each other, they don't impact it. They coexist in different dimensions, you might say. Not that you can say what any of that means, because of course even that, what does dimensions mean? You can't say. But you can notice that that's the case. Like what you're seeing doesn't change with what you're hearing. Sound doesn't change light. Light doesn't change sound. They exist in separate dimensions, you might say. And thought doesn't change either, because they exist in separate dimensions. But it pretends to. And when you confuse those, that's when you've left reality.
Why do you think some people can see that? They wouldn't think that they want to talk, and some can.
Why anything? I mean, the question why is a very interesting sort of a koan to play with.
Yeah, I guess
And you can't answer it.
It's just destiny, or it's.
Well, it's mystery, but even just saying it's destiny, what does that mean?
Give me a break. That's about it. You could try really hard and it just say it's.
But the thing is, it is possible to see. And for those that are interested in looking into that, it's possible to play with this and explore it. And then maybe or maybe not, that maybe your destiny, whatever, to go with that more thoroughly, or maybe not. And okay, all cool. But again, it is what it is. So what will happen, what will be, will be. But one is free to explore this stuff if one has the inclination and the fortune the destiny to be exposed to the information clearly, which is a pretty rare thing because it's so much, it's very sloppy information floating around.
I just realized just sitting here that in the past when I was traveling, I felt like I was really into this and really close and like all determined and so much farther than I am right now, because now I'm in San Francisco and looking for a job. But it's not linear. So, I mean, I'm just watching this pattern, from the conditioning that if you work really hard, you get the thing, and which is helpful right now.
Sure. I mean, there's all that stuff. There's all the apparent mechanisms of personality and all that. That's present. But again, even that, what is it? What's up with that? What's personality? What's emotion? What's reactivity? What's desire?
What?
Again, it's just like saying, what is this? It's an unknown actuality.
It's like a verb.
Yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's actual, but that's really all you can say. Actuality is not qualifiable. It qualifies itself by being what it is. Actuality is very, very precisely exactly what it is, but what that is cannot be said.
Actuality, you mean something existing? I don't know.
There's only, the actuality is the only thing that is. Actuality, reality, what is. You know, in practical terms, you can think about actuality as being the field of the inclusive field of experience.
But actually defining it uses the point.
Well, because again, you're creating a caricature. But that doesn't mean that that's against the rules or something. But again, notice, always notice, if you like, that that's the case. The field of your experience is not the field of your experience. It is this, and it doesn't need to have a name or a label because it doesn't have a name or a label. But it doesn't. It never goes away.
I mean, it's what's happening right now with no past and no.
Whatever. But if there's past and future, it would be happening right now.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, you can't. As soon as you qualify it by nowness or not nowness, what does now mean? What does past mean? What does future mean? That again, that's just spinning off into creating caricatures. This is this exactly the way it is. So if there is a past, in this, if there is a future, because since this is the soul of the entirety of actuality, anything that's actual can be found here. So if there is time, this is where you're going to find it. If there is space, this is where you're going to find it. If there is consciousness, this is where you're going to find it. But don't expect any of those things to be the things that you think you're looking for. Because you're not going to find them, you're just going to find this.
Sounds so easy.
It's not that it's looking. People just looking at itself.
But even that there is looking is a concept. That's supplying an imaginary structurality to it. That there is looking, that there is something seeing, that there is something seeing. This simply is. Where
Yeah, but the appearance is present.
Yeah, the appearance is present.
And that's about it.
Exactly. The appearance is present. And if there is any looking, then it's in that. And if there is anything seen, it is in that. But that is inclusive of any of all of these supposed aspects.
Well, it becomes clear that when you wake up, suddenly,
Sure. This presence is, this is present is a complete full statement. It omits nothing. And its presence is, is it something seen? Is it experience? It's just present. Is there consciousness? You can't find consciousness. You can't find a looker. You can't find a seer. You can't find an object. It's just this. My wife's on a minimalizing kick. She'd love that. Minimalize, throw it out. Because my idea of minimalizing is just, okay, it's already minimalized. What's on TV?
What do you say about the apparent opening and contraction that seems to
Again, it's a curious phenomenon, these kinds of things, and if you look for them, you don't find anything that's actually like that. In the sense that you can't pin down exactly what it is, that if anything, that is actually happening. I mean, that's part of the peculiarity of this. It presents with an infinity of apparent differentiation within itself, both in terms of the way it presents, what's being presented, and also the dynamism of the ways that it seems to be presented. But none of that is analyzable or definitively definable in terms of what any of it is, or how it is, or even if it is like that. All you can say is it seems to be like that. There seems to be all these apparently different modes. But again, you're looking, and you don't actually find that. You can't pin it down that it is that. But nothing is negated. It just resolves to infinite weirdness, which is, if you wanted to sort of very loosely sum up the nature of actuality, infinite weirdness is kind of probably a good rule of thumb.
I sometimes look at that as an interpretation. It's pretty heavy-handed.
Well, sure, maybe so.
Does seem to be true.
Well, yeah, but there's all sorts of moods and flavors, and I mean, if you look at your experiences, there's continual dynamism of shifting of moods, shifting of orientation, shifting of textures. I mean, again, you start having to invent language for these things. Sometimes sometimes you're depressed, sometimes you're open, sometimes things are very luminous, sometimes things are kind of dull, and I mean, whatever, Again, characterizing these things is obviously creating interpretation. But this sort of this apparent diversity of sort of experiential flavor, whatever you want to call it, seems to present itself is very interesting. I mean, that's, you've heard me say, I'm sure many times, that the sort of, one way of characterizing this radiant presence, this that is here, is it is infinitely differentiated. It presents as infinitely differentiated from itself, but it never departs from itself. So it presents as a literally infinite range of differences, but it never becomes at all different from simply itself. which again, of course, is very paradoxical and weird, but then again, that's kind of seems to be what we have. Yeah, well, yeah, it's a loop, but it doesn't. The thing is just weird. It's like how many colors are present in your field of vision in any instant? It's an infinity. There's no way you can categorize them because it's not discrete. I mean, infinite shades and nuances, and every single tiny pixel point within your field of vision is a unique color different from any other color that's appearing in this very instant. And the next instant it changes as your head shifts or your mood shifts or whatever. And yet it's all just it doesn't become anything more than just this one field of vision that's there. So it's this infinite differentiation that never stops. It never moves. It never goes anywhere. It doesn't go beyond the starting point. It doesn't become anything. It is exactly what it is and doesn't ever become anything other than that, even as it presents as infinitely different than that. And like what you're seeing in this instant, you've never seen before. And if you could catalog every other instance of visual information that's ever been present in your consciousness, I mean, it's just, it's absurd, the range of unique apparitions of infinite shapes and colors and stuff. And yet, it's all just this field of vision that's present here, and it's the same old field of vision it's ever been. And zero development. It's just fascinating. It doesn't go anywhere, but there's endless seeming activity without being any actual action. Kind of like a dream that way.
When you get into other dimensions, it seems to go somewhere. I mean, it seems as if it's
Yeah, but even other dimensions is just more of the infinite diversity, and again, it doesn't depart from this.
It's
Yeah,
just
it's
like
very
being here,
strange.
only you're in a different dimension, but it's still what's in front of you.
Well, there's all kinds of dimensions. I mean, dimensions are kind of a matter of categorizing again, so they're sort of imaginary. There's a dimension of vision, a dimension of sound, a dimension of thought, a dimension of touch. I mean, if you look at where your field of vision is, so your field of vision is sort of like a sideways, fuzzy edge over that's sort of floating right here, right? Now, where's this dimension of sound? It's not the same place. It's sort of in its own little space, but it doesn't actually. You can't say where it is. You can't say what its relationship is to the field of vision, but they don't impinge on each other. They coexist. And likewise, touch. So here's sensation of touch, and like I feel the chair under my butt, and that exists in its own dimension, which doesn't impinge on the dimension of sound or the dimension of vision. And the same with thought. Thought occurs in its own dimension. So I can be thinking whatever I'm thinking, and it doesn't, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then to look at extrasensory dimensions that we don't even classify as humans, dimensions of vibes or flavors or moods or whatever. As humans, we only classify things that are relevant to our games. And most of experience is just weird amorphous tinglings and stuff that doesn't, is not relevant to anything. And so we don't have words for it or language for it. And so as a result, we don't think about it very much. Because we're used to thinking about what we can verbalize, having this narration going on, so on and so forth. And all of this can be said to be different dimensions, different dimensionalities. But all of these dimensions are just aspects of texture, apparent texture within the experiential field. So again, it's just more instance of it being infinitely differentiated within itself without ever becoming anything else. And you can look for yourself at the way that's so. It's fascinating. It's endlessly fascinating.
So you were saying before that I got this right. I heard it Right now in my world, nothing else exists but this. This is everything. This is,
Well, look and see for yourself. Can you find anything else?
I could think of my kids back home.
But that's a
The
but
highway
that's
waiting
but that's
for
a
me.
thought that's present
Yeah,
here
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
The thought isn't your kids. It's just a thought that's here.
It's kind of like being in a dream, and there's nothing outside until I go out the door.
Of course. I mean, you may think there's a road out there, but prove it. There's no road until you see it. I mean, it's just pragmatism. It's not theory there, philosophy there. It's just simple reality check. A good rule of thumb is what can you know absolutely for certain.
Right now.
And the only thing, well, it has to be right now because there's no other than.
That's redundant, huh?
Yeah, it is. So absolutely for certain is this here and now, and that's inclusive. Because there's no that, and there's no there, and there's no then. If there was, it would be this here now. I can remember what I had for lunch yesterday, and that's an apparition that's appearing here now.
It feels like the personality structure is composed entirely of patterns that aren't advantageous to the personality structure. During the course of doing noticing recently, obviously it's interpreted to be calling it grief, but a lot of grief has come up, and I've realized that it feels like the structure wants to hang onto it because that's what the personality structure is made of.
Personality is fascinating. My experience is fascinating because it's defined not just by the elements that are identified, but it's also defined by the elements. So not only does your personality consist of what it feels like it does consist of, but it also consists of what it feels like it doesn't consist of. It's like, gosh, I'm this, and I really wish I was that. That is being defined just as much as it is, even though it's being disidentified with. So I mean, the sort of the habitual self-love that personalities often can have, or aspects of that can have, is an instance of this kind of thing, where the identification of the pattern being a certain way, and then there's a contrast in it, which are existence just as much. So they're actually the personality too, even though the personality is holding they aren't. So I mean, it's a really complex game structure. I mean, a good way of cutting through all that is just to see that the personality has no coherence, and all the various elements that seem to be whatever they are, structures and mechanisms and so on, aren't really there. They're just sort of, they're imaginative linking together of separate flashes of energies that basically have nothing to do with each other. The myth of psychological integration, I guess, is what I'm trying to pop. It's like the personality is not an entity. It's like going out looking at the stars in the night sky and seeing all the constellations. They're not a thing. They're just separate flashes of light. And the personality is like that too. It's not a machine. It's just a bunch of parts that are floating there. But then again, because of this imaginative projective faculty that's fabricated, that these are actually structural and are actually related and are actually me or not me or whatever, all of the elaboration, but it's bootstrapped up out of a fundamental disintegration. You know, personality is not integrated. It's just a hodgepodge of random elements, random energies that may happen to be present to various degrees and present dynamically, because it's not like they're actually there. They're sort of morphing through and becoming and appearing and disappearing and so on and so forth.
Yeah. That's the thing about God.
Hmm?
I was just reminded about talking about being afraid to die, which is like and jumping off the cliff, but it's giving up your patterns of these constructs that you've created, and seeing that you don't really need them, but you're allowing to hold on to them,
Exactly.
and that's what keeps them going.
Yeah, but the whole thing's a fabrication, because the patterns aren't really patterns anyway. They're just separate elements that really have nothing to do with each other. You don't actually have them. They're just there. And you're never going to actually lose them, because they're just there. And they appear and disappear anyway already.
I kind of get what you're saying, but on the other hand, I mean, some people are, that's, so they for example, and have, oh, some people have this kind. I mean, there are personality types.
Sure.
Integration seems to create some kind of a label you put on this type of.
Sure, but again, if you look at what's actually there, there's always vastly more than that. Functionally, everyone's a one-off.
Everyone's a one-off?
Yeah. You're exactly the way you are, and no one else is the way you are.
Yeah.
And so to classify you as in any way is absurd oversimplification. And so there's sort of these rough classifications of shoehorning someone, oh, this person's bipolar, or this person's neurotic, or this person, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's very heavy-handed censorship of ignoring other qualities that they also possess that don't fit into that. Because people are not simple, people are infinitely complex, people are a mess.
Well, if we can't call that a napkin, we certainly can't call a person by any means. Bipolar.
This that seem to be energy. Some people seem to have a lot of kind of energy.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
And others, we all have different energies.
Well, all forms embody certain flavors of energy, if it's qualities of energy, on a dynamic basis. Yeah, but again, exactly what that means or what's up with that, you can't pin down. Yeah, it's very, very paradoxical. So when you begin to look at this more carefully and more precisely, you could say people are exactly precisely the way they are, but you can't say what that way is. So everything is precisely the way it is, but you can't say what that is. So it's not, as soon as you say it's precisely the way it is, it sounds like a limitation. But it's not actually like that, because the way that it is actually includes an infinity, a fractal infinity of contradictory energies that are all over the place. But it's not important that that's so. The main thing is just to notice that it is. And then in practice, you deal with people according to how they are, what their energy is, and how they're functioning, and stuff like that. But all of that is an oversimplification of what's actually happening, which cannot be said. So if I'm relating to someone, it looks like I'm relating to them according to the way they are and the way I am, and our energies combining and dancing with each other, or whatever, right, interacting. And yet, if you look at what's actually happening, you can't say. Because you can't find them as an entity. You can't find me as an entity. You can't find our energies as an entity. You can't find the interaction as being anything that's specifiable. It's just an infinite mystery. But that doesn't negate the fact that things are the way they are, and things have their own flavors and so on and so forth. It's contradictory.
Don't really know what's going on. You two were the chicken in the school here. But Aaron has to see it. And it's like, oh, no, you can always get them in sleep. They're maybe it's just like this, first bed back in the one now, it's like a
You want to sleep?
Energy sounds so interesting.
Well, of course, everything's interesting. I mean, it's just fascinating.
Well,
The way things work.
because we can't see it.
But everything's like that. Everything's exactly the same. You know, I mean, this conversation we're having, you know, it looks like, well, we're talking and you're you and I'm me and it's all just, but this is just as far out and just as ungraspable as the Qigong master putting things to sleep. What it actually is completely unfathomable. See, it's just a mind-boggling, inconceivable mystery, and it's explicit.
Why?
Why? What?
Why is this more unbelievable? I don't forget the word you used, than the putting the
I didn't say more. I said it's the same.
even the same. I mean, because this happens a lot. I mean, I know.
No, nothing happens a lot. This has never happened before.
I just realized that when I said that. I mean, one seems like a miracle almost, and one seems not like
This is a miracle. What's happening here? How can this happen? You're sitting there and you're moving your mouth and you're making sounds and you're thinking thoughts and making words, and I'm hearing the sounds and turning them into words, and I'm moving my lips and making sounds back to you. How does that happen? What's happening?
I guess
here?
what I'm used to.
Well, we're used to dumbing it down and saying, oh, this is normal. We're used to devaluing it, but that devaluation is imaginary. But we define it as common and ordinary instead of seeing what it is. See the actuality. It's unique, miraculous, absolutely inconceivable occurrence that's entirely unanalyzable, ungraspable, undescribable, undefinable. And not just in a subtle philosophical sense, but just really, like, obviously. You know, it's just, I can move my hand. How on earth can that happen? Look at this. There's no way I can tell you how that's happening. Oh, but it's just moving your hand. Anyone can do that. Well, yeah, but what does that mean? What is that referring to? What is it? You know, it's inconceivable. It's a miracle. It literally is a miracle, not just in some, you know, poetic,
Yeah.
mystical
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, before you close, can you talk a little bit about the retreat? Like, what happens or whatever you want to say about it?
I'm doing a retreat in June in Joshua Tree, Southern California, in the desert, which is an absolutely lovely, very lunar landscape kind of a place, very otherworldly. And for let's see, about 4 days, I guess, I will be living there with the other people who are in the trees will be living there, and we will be meeting all morning, every morning, and every evening, with the afternoons off, and there will be um, a lot of different kinds of stuff happening. Does that capture it well enough?
I was going to ask about the different kinds of stuff, but
Well, we'll see. We'll see. It'll be a variety of that, and it will be intense.
is it silent or talking?
Whatever you want.
Do you say intense or intense?
Your choice. Tents are not
Intense.
forbidden, but most of the meetings will be in nicely air conditioned buildings. The people that run that place are basically UFO contactees.
Really?
Yeah. They're like channeling ascended masters and stuff. They're all totally wacko. So the architecture and the decoration reflects all that.
You haven't found any UFOs there?
Who knows? What's UFO mean?
Actually, we are you guys here. And other planets point to you. You
Hmm?
always. And then how
Well, that's fine.
What is the intense quality?
I don't know. It exhausts the hell out of me. Well, we can knock off now. Thank you all very much for coming.